Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today it is my great honor to bring back for the second time someone who has arguably had the biggest global impact in history for voices on abuse survivors and whistleblowers to be heard today. 35-year US government whistleblower on deep state and New World Order, MKUltra mind control and human trafficking survivor, author, writer, podcaster, star of the acclaimed documentary Trance, Mind Control, Human Slavery, and Recovering the Nation, and someone who has been referenced on this podcast countless times over the last few years by survivors, whistleblowers, and parents from all over the world, Cathy O'Brien. If you're new here or haven't heard Cathy's amazing testimony, here's a very short synopsis. Cathy was born into a multi-generational incest-based family and sold to the CIA and into MKUltra mind control by her father, who used the opportunity to receive judicial immunity against child pornography charges instead of protecting his daughter. Cathy endured a horrific childhood devoid of free thought and filled with abuse, where she was passed around to deep state perpetrators who enslaved her under trauma-based mind control to be used as a sex slave and to have her help them carry out their dark agendas. It wouldn't be until a hero named Mark Phillips, who worked as a US government intelligence insider and who would later become the love of Cathy's life, would come along and rescue Cathy from the Washington, D.C. swamp monsters and perpetrators and hand her the keys to her own mind. And ever since, Cathy has been blowing the whistle. If you've listened to this podcast for a while, you have likely heard a long list of survivors who have referenced Cathy's work as being a core part of their healing journey and a reference they recommend to the audience. Her books, Access Denied, Reasons for National Security, Transformation of America, and PTSD, Time to Heal, have become staples for both survivors and helpers of survivors to understand how to heal from unthinkable and generational trauma, and how the organized global child trafficking crime syndicates that run the world are interlaced and woven into the very fabric of society. Cathy has done extraordinary work over the years and was even one of the original inspirations for me to start this podcast. But perhaps the most extraordinary work she has done is in the deep, unconditional love she has cultivated within herself that she quite literally sprinkles everywhere she goes and onto everyone she comes in contact with. She lives her very own quote, "Love is the greatest healer." And even though she has fought an uphill battle for her voice to be heard and still faces censorship, bullying, and worse, she always lives the love she is and leaves everyone better than she found them, even those who still adamantly try to silence her. Cathy is a living, breathing miracle and a testament as to what lies on the other side of healing. And what you will see with Cathy every time is that on the other side of healing trauma is love. If you missed the beautiful first episode Cathy and I did together that YouTube decided to terminate very rudely, I'll have that listed in the show notes and you guys can watch it across all alternative platforms. Please open your eyes to see and your ears to hear, because in typical Cathy O'Brien fashion, you will be learning so much within this interview. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give just a couple reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the podcast as a guest or have any information to share privately with me, please email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. You can also use this email if you'd like to be a part of and contribute to my new book series featuring written testimonies by survivors and whistleblowers. And you can find the video outlining all the details of that in the show notes as well. And lastly, I'd love your support on my new Substack where I'm taking up investigative journalism, and you can subscribe to me there at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. All of my links are in the show notes, and I can't thank you all enough for caring so deeply about each amazing guest and for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor disclosures. So you guys, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, the woman who single-handedly, with the help of hero Mark Phillips, took on the deep state pedophile cabal while leading a movement proving that there is no depth to a mother's love and no trauma too deep to heal from. Author of Transformation of America, Access Denied for Reasons of National Security and PTSD Time to Heal, survivor and survivor advocate, walking miracle, voice for the voiceless, and someone I'm so blessed to call my friend, the one, the only, Cathy O'Brien. Cathy, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you. That was the most beautiful introduction. Oh my gosh, that was lovely.
And
Thank you.
it's true. You have such a big footprint in the community and such a life story. It's hard to condense it, but you've done so much for me, for others. And like I said, I wouldn't have probably started this podcast if not for you. You were somebody who inspired me so deeply to do what I'm doing, because I thought if Cathy can do it, so can I. She's wearing the weight of the world on her shoulders. She's out there, decades before I'm doing it. If she can do it, there's no excuse why I can't, So I really appreciate you, and I know everybody listening does, Cathy. So I wanted to start. You haven't been on in a little while, and I thought maybe we'd catch people up on how you've been, if you're working on anything. So what's been going on in your life?
I've been speaking out. I encourage everyone to, get away from their devices and get out in their communities and, start making a positive difference. Talk to each other, eye to eye, heart to heart, soul to soul. And I do what I say, and I'm out there doing the same thing. And it's been amazing seeing how people are taking back their lives and beginning with their free thought and their free will, their soul expression, their strength of spirit, that power of love, and getting out in communities and stopping this indoctrination of children in our school system, stopping the promotion of pedophilia and the gross and blatant injustices that have been occurring. People are getting active, and they're finding ways around the corrupted child protective services. They're starting to see how they can make a difference and help the children. And so speaking out to those people and showing them how they can best effectively accomplish their goals has been deeply rewarding to me. It's seeing the education system finally being addressed by the parents, no matter what the media says about, parents not having the right to speak in the school system. They do, and they're doing it. Those are their children, and they're either going to have their voice and make the difference, or they're going to take the kids out of the system and homeschool. So no matter what anyone's direction is, if they're helping to care for all these children who have been trafficked, who are emerging, or to take in survivors who are just needing a safe place to be, then they're doing it. And that's been what I've been involved in. I'm loving it. I'm so encouraged and excited to see this happening on a global scale. And people are finally realizing that what they're seeing isn't new. What's new is that they're seeing it, and awareness is the first step towards positive, necessary change. It's happening.
Yes. And for you to say that, you've seen this
Yeah.
for decades. You've seen this movement crawl, 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 and then all of a sudden it's finally starting to gain a little bit of momentum. So for you to notice that is huge, because you've really seen the whole thing better than a lot of people have, I think.
Yeah, and to have experienced it for so long and so much injustice from from my earliest childhood when my father received immunity from prosecution to national security being invoked on my testimony and censorship, all the different injustices. There's no way that I am looking for a judge to bang a gavel and tell me I'm right. That's not going to make any difference. For me, the ultimate justice is positive change through public awareness. That awareness is rising. And Emma, sweet Emma, you have done such a phenomenal job of not only raising that awareness, but doing it with so much love and so much light that it is lighting the path forward for other survivors to be able to heal and find a safe place for their voice in that process. And that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. It's an honor to be able to do this. I figure if you guys can live it, then the least I could do is listen to it, and that's what we should all be looking to do is what can we do to partake in this? And I loved how you mentioned taking in survivors, because that's a problem. I'm sure you get it all the time. People are always like,
Yeah.
I'm a survivor, where do I go? Or I know a survivor, where should I tell them to go? And it's really hard to recommend somewhere. We've gotten to the point where we have to sort of take that upon ourselves and say, do I have space in my home to where somebody could come here and be safe? And sort of work around what they've destroyed in a sense. They can't even go to a darn safe house and be safe anymore.
That's so true. And all they need is a safe place, and they can apply the methods that Mark taught me in PTSD Time to Heal, because they're so easy to self-apply, because it reminds us all what we've been blessed with all along. We have the most amazing, resilient body, mind, and spirit. We have so much capacity within us to heal mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically. We can heal on all levels. And it's just that we forgot. We have been conditioned for generations to look outside ourselves, to big government, big pharma, big tech, big cult religion, to tell us how to live our lives. And we forgot. We've been blessed with those answers. It's within us. We have it. We go inside and remember who we are, why we're here, and we can heal from anything and take back our freedom and our right to live our lives the way they're intended to be lived.
You are such a bright light. You always hype me up whenever I talk to you. You have the best attitude, Cathy. I love it. And one of the things that I love that you do, and you do so much for all of us, you write these books, you do constant podcasts, you have a blog, you have your own podcast, which I love. And recently you put out an incredible episode called Have You Seen My Childhood? And I didn't know, it looked sort of like a different title than your typical content. And so I listened to it and I was crying through it. And at the same time, I felt so much hope in my heart. You did such a beautiful job of explaining and sort of demystifying some of these things that I think get very diluted when they're talked about in a very short and compressed way, to where people say, well, that's not real. It's a conspiracy. It just sounds too crazy, and in that episode, you did a really good job tying in some of those, I guess, misunderstood aspects of this big picture as to the whole purpose of why they're doing this to kids, what reasons they're doing it for, the ways that they recruit kids, and I'd love to talk to you a little bit about that today, because I think that still is very misunderstood in a lot of ways, and society gets glimpses of it, but they're so quick to push it away. And so I wanted to start by asking you, what are some of the ways that children could potentially be scouted or sought out for these programs?
Well, like in my case, since I had been sexually abused at literally from birth, and then was being trafficked to my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge, and then my father used me in child pornography. It was, clear that I had been sexually abused. And it had been found in the Hitler-Himmler research that came over with Project Paperclip in the wake of World War II. The information is trauma is the basis of mind control. And the formula for mind control is the same, whether it's of an individual, a nation, or the world, with trauma the basis of it. And there's no trauma more horrific on the human mind than sexual abuse of a child prior to age 5 while their brain is still forming. This creates a dissociative disorder, that repressed memory that gets shoved down, that compartmentalized memory. When I have the neuron pathways in our brain shutting down, our suggestibility heightens. We don't have as much free thought, critical analysis. And as we lose more and more of that free thought, critical analysis, we become highly suggestible and easily led. So the fact that I had been so blatantly sexually abused, once that was identified by the members of my grandfather's Blue Masonic Lodge, where the politicians and the law enforcement and everything were those, any secret society we need to question. Secrecy is our problem. And those secrets are that if a child is abused, they become highly suggestible and easily led. And that is part of a global agenda to create a compliant society that will do as they're told and just march to a slave society agenda. And it's been going on for generations now. And it's something that we need to be aware of. And after so many generations, after 3 generations, any abuse-based, knowledge-based belief system becomes autogenic in the brain. It's passed down generationally. Well, with this pedophile agenda being allowed to proliferate, being sanctioned by the courts since the early 1960s that I know of, we have a generational effect where we have been subliminally affected to allow for pedophilia to happen. Then it's been promoted within the school system. The school system, once it was taken over by the federal government, learned to identify the children who are abused and target them for mind control projects. So it's been going on a long time, and the generational effect is in place, which is why more people are compliant and not responding to the abuse of a child the way that they should. But it's because of the generational conditioning. We need to know that without free thought, there's no free will. And with no free will, there's no soul expression, no ability to have that moral compass to gather up our strength of spirit and take a stand for the children. We get blinded by the mind manipulation that we've all been exposed to for a long time. So we all, on some level or another, need to reclaim and retain our free thought so that we can live the life we're intended to with that moral compass and realize soul is stronger than genetics. Knowledge is our defense against mind manipulation and mind control. And once we have that, we're able to take a stand against what's going on. But people have been blindsided for a long time. Their eyes are opening now. They're realizing it, and they're starting to understand that they can overcome even the genetic aspects and start realizing just how bad the effect of abuse is on a young child while their brain is forming.
Yes, that part is very misunderstood in all academia, just how trauma actually affects our body. And, we're taught things like disease can be generational. We're taught and believe that all these other things can be generational that can be passed down to us, but nowhere in there does it talk about trauma, which is really, really sad, because I think if more people did understand that,
Yes.
you talk about how even if you didn't go through what you did as far as being put in a government sanctioned program and being systematically abused, if somebody is a child of a parent who is a child of another parent who watched TV for, the last 20 years, 30 years, there's definitely trauma that's passed down that way too, which you talk about on the sliding scale of mind control.
Definitely. And then there's the physical abuse. And if those things aren't consciously identified and they're only just kept repressed, they like undermine our daily life, where they just, we're not really even aware, but people will go into abusive relationships because it's what they're used to. It's what they know. And until they consciously realize it, they're they're subject to continuing and allowing for abuse to perpetuate. So we can all break the cycle by having the awareness that it's within us to do so. But we need to remember that. And again, that's what PTSD Time to Heal is about. It reminds us, oh, we do have all the power. We do have the choice. We do have the ability to stop this cycle.
Yes, 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 Cathy. Like I said, you always have just the best insights and outlooks on everything. And I think you give so many people hope. And so there's the generational aspect, I'm guessing, is the biggest way that they target. They can
Yeah.
obviously do this in schools. So once they get these children or recruit them, what are ways that they are looking to use these children?
Well, we look at what's happening in the school system now with when this mind control masked as a virus, this global trauma was unleashed on the global population, 2020. The effect that it had on children was very detrimental, compounded by limiting oxygen to the brain necessary for critical analysis-free thought by wearing a mask, and then sitting behind plexiglass and separated from each other. We caused fearful damage in the children, and that fear is a basis of mind control. It was deliberately used as a trauma base for manipulating the minds of the children through a deliberate education indoctrination system that has been imposed on our children, especially through computerization, the rewriting of history, and by having the children focus on emotional, social issues instead of learning how to research and thinking free, picking up that pen, activating the logic critical analysis part of their brain, to write out information and then consciously see it in front of them. All that's been taken out. We need to get writing by hand back in the school system. We need to understand that all our children were traumatized and it's being capitalized in the school system. So we need to definitely protect our children there. We're seeing the effects of it. With it comes an identity dissociation where identity confusion that children, have anyway, especially through their teen years, is exaggerated horribly. And now it's been mislabeled as gender confusion. And any child who's been sexually abused, that gender confusion concept just rockets into their brain and creates a very powerful form of mind control, much the same way as it was when I was targeted for that as a child. But even those who haven't been sexually abused are still confused, especially with repetition. Once the trauma's in place, they're highly suggestible. Repetition is the most basic form of mind control. So these traumatized children are then repeatedly told about this this gender confusion, this transgender movement, and being further indoctrinated through the pharmaceutical aspect of it. And once children are in that pharmaceutical hormonal mess, they are going to be fueling big pharma pocketbook for life, because they're going to have to continue on that intrusive, horrific regimen. So that's how our children are being targeted today. We need to realize that more and more parents are. They're seeing it. They understand what's going on. They're opposing the sexualization of our children, and this transgender movement is starting to fade pretty quick, just because of the outrage of knowing what was actually being done. So that's how children are being targeted. Anytime trauma occurs, we all need to safeguard our own free thought in times like that. And we need to especially safeguard our children's free thought at a time like that. Get them to pick up that pen, activate the logic, shift the emotional trauma to logic, write it out, deal with it. When we write out our fears and our traumas, we should always add a solution, because, and I spell that SOUL, a solution. Write that out too, because it forces the brain to fire in new ways. It opens neuron pathways. It lifts us out of the negativity so we get a clear path forward. This is really important because any indoctrination, any mind manipulation is done by shutting down neuron pathways in the brain. We need to open them up. We need to fling that back open the way they're intended. And a pen and paper is a good way to do it. Getting out in nature, petting our dogs, walking them. Those are all really important little things we can do to activate our brains and keep those neuron pathways open instead of shutting down.
And I just want to say, your dogs are so cute.
Yours too. Oh my gosh. I love your relationship with your little puppy. It's just the sweetest
Oh,
thing.
oh, they change your life. It's
Uh-huh.
such a version of unconditional love that you don't really see or experience anywhere else. It is so precious. They are just the
It,
sweetest creatures.
they're so important, and it's something that I always encourage survivors. It's so easy to be so self-absorbed in the healing process that we forget to look outside ourselves. And one of the most healing things we can do is reach out to others. I hear from survivors around trauma times, like calendar dates, like maybe Christmas or something, where they've been horribly abused. They're so down and depressed at a time like that. And it's like, well, reach outside yourself then. Go volunteer at the animal shelter. Go reach out to children and or maybe the elderly. Do something just to give of yourself and give of your time. It's not easy to do when you're already feeling kind of down, but if we force ourselves to do it, it becomes an exercise that gets easier and easier. And then we learn to give. And once we learn to do that, it's a very, very strong healing mechanism in us.
Yes, I know that does. It feels so good. And it's such an underrated healing method
Yeah.
because it is. Whenever you don't feel good, you don't want to get up out of bed. You just want to lay there. You want to, curl up and internalize and hold everything in. And these little simple things, they make everybody feel good, regardless of how you're feeling. It might not fix everything, but it's going to make you feel good if you do something good out in the world and actually get up whenever you feel like you can't.
Yeah, it does. And that it's the unconditional love of pets, is always there for us to help us through because they're not judging. They're just there just to be the love, and remind us to live that love too. And it really helps us to keep moving forward. It's such a beautiful, we have so many beautiful gifts in life. We have so much opportunity. And if we get too internalized and down, we're not seeing those anymore. We don't want to miss the miracles around us. We don't want to miss the synchronicities, the intuitions, the beauty that every day has for us. And it's something that once we remember it and start embracing it, we don't want to let go. We don't want to give in to negativity. We don't want to give in to those dark calendar dates and start going down that slippery slope of negativity. Because once we do, it's like going into a black hole and it starts sucking everything into it, where everything starts looking bleak. We need to rise above that and just, kind of stop that process before it starts so that we can enjoy the beauty that life is laying out in front of us that we would otherwise miss.
Yes, I love that. And yeah, even getting out in nature, animals, there's so many little simple pleasures in life that we've sort of forgotten about as a society. I lived in a city for a while as an adult. I moved out of my country life and was like, I want to go venture out into the city. And I found out, years later, my soul felt so depleted from removing myself from all the trees and all the nature and the smell,
Yes.
and I felt sort of depressed in a way. I felt like a shell of myself. And so, being back in nature now, it feels so good, but it's just those little things that you are so easy to take for granted.
Yeah, it is. And there's other things too. There's the energetic connection with people that gets lost when we shut down and we're closed off inside ourselves. And people who've been through abuse, extreme abuse, usually have heightened senses, heightened intuitions, um, maybe even what would be termed psychic abilities. They have these other capacities. They have this intuitive sense of people around them, knowing who's good, knowing who's bad. But that's the kind of senses that puppies have. I mean, they know who's good, they know who's bad. They tell us, they let us know in case we're not paying attention. That's something we can pay attention to. I hear a lot of survivors say that they get worn out from the being the empathy, of taking in all the energy. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. Recognize the energy. That might be somebody that you can give to and lift. It might be somebody you need to avoid. Pay attention to those and use those as a part of your I don't want to say armor, but in a way, it's better than building a wall, to close yourself and shut down. Instead, be open and receptive, but don't take it in as your own. You know, use it as a recognition on what you can do and an impact you can make and who you can help, who's open to receive, who's not. We can use those intuitions to the most beautiful advantage, because really, when we're all just living the love that we are and living the life the way we're intended to live it, we naturally unite on those levels. It brings everyone together. We don't need to be losing that just because we've all been manipulated and told to divide, divide, divide. We need to go back to the free thought, free will, soul expression, connect on that natural, innate level, allow ourselves to feel, and use that in the most productive, positive way. That's how life should be lived.
I couldn't agree more, Cathy. That was filled with so much goodness in what you just said. And one of the things I want to go back on is I want to talk a little bit with you about the intuition, psychic abilities, some of these spiritual gifts and what you've experienced or have seen, or maybe embody yourself. This is a part of the puzzle too, that sort of like trauma, where a lot of society is very ignorant on how trauma actually affects our bodies, and it's not taught to psychologists. I feel like some of the innate gifts that were given on through, I would say, birth, and then can be developed. And I know these programs exploit them and they force children to use these gifts. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about things like psychic abilities and telekinesis or any of that, and sort of get your thoughts on it and what you saw, and to sort of demystify this, just because it's a topic that I think people are uncomfortable having. But in my opinion, I think it's really beautiful to discover what we're capable of, and the things that are actually inherent in our bodies, versus looking at it like something too woo-woo-y or something that could be false, and so I'd love for you to speak on that, because you do a really great job whenever you've discussed this topic before.
Well, there's so many different angles to it, and it's so individualistic to each person. Like in my case, as I was losing my free thought into MK Ultra mind control, like I was around 5 or 6. I had already been subjected to MK Ultra to a large degree, and I just wish there was some place in the world where people didn't hurt each other. And I remember just praying and praying and praying, saying that I wanted to be a chosen one, to be a nun. I want to be chosen to be a nun, not a chosen one of MK Ultra. And it wouldn't have probably been any better for me in that regard, but still, I was just a little bitty kid growing up in a Catholic church. So I thought maybe that would be a safe place. Well, I got this knowing, this immense, intense knowing that there were other plans for my life. My life would unfold another way. I was going to survive all that I'd be put through. I was going to come out the other side. I would know love. I would have a child. I had all these insights that I didn't even comprehend at that young age. And yet it was so clear. It was like seeing a future, like being given that. Sometimes when we pray, we forget to listen because the answers are given. And when I found that at such an early age and have that strength in my spirit and carry me through, all the way when I got to the other side, it was like seeing how all that had actually come true and how it had happened and blossomed. And it's like, okay, that's leading me to this level of my life's purpose. And it's something that I learned to pay attention to. So if I'm praying for physical healing, if I'm praying for strength of any kind, or whatever definition we want to give that when we're just have such huge need within and we're just reaching out with everything we got for some kind of an answer, we need to listen because the answer is already there. It always has been, it always will be. And it's infinite. It's an infinite source of strength, an infinite source of healing, an infinite source of love, and the intuitions that can come through that as encouragement for us needs to just be embraced for what it is. It's a part of life that is innate to us all, not to just the abused. The abused just get a clearer view of it, but it's innate. It's within us all. It's all part of our being, what we've been blessed with. And I celebrate it every day. I live in a constant state of gratitude just because of this knowing, this infinite, infinite love within. And it creates a completely different attitude for living life, and one where we learn to listen, not only within ourselves, but start listening to what other people are really saying. Start hearing them beyond our initial reactions to what we think they're saying. We start listening deeper, but there's a whole nother depth to life that's attached to this heightened senses, these heightened intuitions, that it's such a beautiful celebration. And I encourage everyone to rediscover it. It's there.
Yes. What are some other types of heightened senses? Or you've mentioned 44 times visual acuity, which I think is just incredible that our bodies are capable of doing that. What other things are we capable of when, put under duress or trauma like you and others were?
Well, there are different aspects of our brain that kick in to compensate, like how a blind person would develop heightened hearing, So we get these other capabilities. The 44 times visual acuity comes from trying to see abuse before it happens. You see a lot of survivors with their eyes wide with the whites around because those are like trauma eyes, especially with the pupillary dilation. And it's something that can be recognized in traumatized children too, where we can identify who's being abused. Those trauma eyes are very, they show a lot. At the same time, those trauma eyes are so wide open that it increases visual acuity and it expands peripheral vision. The pinpoint vision that it gives allows for accuracy for like the military to point and shoot and not miss their target, for people in sports to be able to make their basket or hit the ball or whatever. There's this visual acuity is used in so many different ways, and once we realize we have this capacity within us, we don't have to have trauma to drive it. We realize our brains have this ability and we can access it and use it for our own for our own good. The hearing can also heighten. I mean, a lot of survivors can hear a pin drop. The olfactory senses pick up very strong, where the sense of smell is heightened, where they smell things more intensely. So we get these different senses that will kick in, and if they come in with are recognized because of trauma that happened, it's still our brains are capable of it. MK Ultra mind control accesses these abilities very deliberately for their mind control programming. If it can be manipulated from the outside by excuse me, people in MK Ultra, then imagine what we can do from within ourselves when we realize, oh, this ability exists. Use the strength of the spirit to drive it, use the power of love to drive it. And all of a sudden, we are accessing all these beautiful gifts that we've been blessed with all along that we forgot about. Because again, we've been conditioned for generations to look outside ourselves to authority so that we just follow what we're told to do. Look within, go within, rediscover what we've been blessed with. And it's so phenomenal. We just have a whole another world to explore once we all, access that and go back to living life the way it was intended to be lived.
Yes, I love that you said that. I went to college for exercise science and was always super fascinated in what our bodies can do. I love
Yeah,
athletics and stuff like that, and just sort of like, seeing and understanding how our bodies work together. It's incredible. But one of the things that I was sort of always disappointed with was it seems like textbooks, even though it's amazing to learn about on a cellular level what we can do, what our muscles can do if they work together, we're never told that our bodies are capable of so much more than just what's in that textbook. They make us sort of seem like we're just kind of three-dimensional creatures. We can only do this. You have lots of genetics on your side that might prevent you from doing stuff, and learning all of this from survivors over these last few years of what we're actually capable of, even under duress, like just understanding that our bodies have the capability to dissociate. It's horrific to think about being under that much duress to where that happens. But the fact that a child can do that is a miracle in a lot of ways, because they wouldn't survive if they didn't have that capability.
right.
So learning that we're capable of that, it brings tears to my eyes to think, gosh, like how special our bodies are, that they provide so many ways to protect us, to heal us, to restore us, to redeem us. And we're not taught any of it. We're not even taught what can happen as a result of trauma. We're just sort of left with these, like you said, Western medicine answers where, oh, well, if you don't feel good, call your doctor, instead of
Yeah,
looking inside and saying, well, is there something in me that I can fix myself, that might just require some love or a different diet change or
yeah,
practice, and I love that you're such a big advocate for things like that, and I really appreciate it. And it's to me, like I said, I have fallen in love with myself, like learning about what my body's capable of, because I'm like,
yeah.
people's self-esteem would be so much higher if they knew how miraculous they were. But we're just told like, oh, you're just these little humans that are meant to work all your whole lives, and you're not capable of doing anything else. And it's really beautiful and magical to learn, just like you said, to remember who we are.
Yeah, it is. It's so exciting that there's so much basic information on our mind brain function was buried under national security. And intelligence insider Mark Phillips was working the highest levels of intelligence mind sciences to preserve the sanctity of free thought, because he knew, like my experience taught me, that without free thought, there's no free will. And without that free will, we don't have our soul expression, our moral compass, the ability to gather our strength of spirit and live the love we are, live our life's purpose. All that is taken through mind control. And he realized that there was a criminal faction that was wanting to create a compliant society and targeting the children, and were manipulating our minds, because they can't stop this beauty of all that we are inside. They can only stop our ability to think, to express it. That's why mind control is pervasive. That's why our children are being indoctrinated. It's to subdue our ability to have our free thought, which ultimately gives us the expression of our our spirit and our soul. When Mark found that being buried under national security for generations, he was livid, and wanted to do something about it. He couldn't do anything with it because he was bound by laws of sedition. So he lifted my daughter and me out of the Washington, D.C. swamp and reminded me that it's within me to heal. He reminded me of all those things. And so now it was my experience to heal. I am not bound by laws of sedition. That information is in PTSD time to heal. And it reminds us all that we can reclaim all of that. We just need to remember. We need to remember how to take care of ourselves, how to nutritionally listen to our bodies and feed our bodies, to drink enough water, to get enough sleep, restful sleep. That's an important one too. And many survivors have endured sleep deprivation, and then they get into a pattern of that deprivation. They have night terrors. When I started having night terrors, I kept a pen and a paper beside the bed, and I would make a note of those. And I found that by making note of them, shut them off, the same way that making note of intrusive memory flashes would stop that flashing, and allow for me to write out the memory in full. So it was like at night, I would just make a note of that and stop the night terrors. I encourage every survivor to keep a notebook right there, make that note. Well, once I overcame that, I realized I didn't have to wake up and make note of it anymore. I shut it off as it started, the same way that I choose my thoughts if I'm going down a dark, negative hole of second guessing myself and wanting to go into an old, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to start that. I don't allow it to happen. So I transfer that over to sleep. Survivors can do that. We all can do that. We have an ability to choose to be able to have restful, peaceful sleep. And when we have restful, peaceful sleep without that intrusive nonsense, we have a capacity for intuitions on that level too. And many answers come to us, many psychic intuitions, many abilities to see into the future even come when we're getting restful sleep. So that's a very important time for our brains. It's an important time to discover more miracles that we've been blessed with. And it, we just need plenty of good sleep to do it. So we take the time for that, and not have to jump up with an alarm clock, to be able to sleep as long as we need, whether it's 8 hours, 10 hours, or 4. People are different, but as long as it's the full sleep, that allows for us to be healthier in body, mind, and spirit.
Yes, that is definitely something, that gets downplayed in society, even outside of survivors. There's this like hustle mentality,
Yeah.
we forget that when we sleep, our brains are flushing out toxins and it has its own cleaning mechanisms too, on top of, like you said, being able to heal, and so many people are conditioned, whether it's from trauma that they endured or from society telling them, oh, you don't need sleep, just work 24 hours a day, you'll be fine. Sleeps for the week type thing. And it's like, man, like we've come so far from understanding how to take care of ourselves.
We have, and it's all that because we on that treadmill, working so many jobs just to make ends meet. It's part of the agenda. It's very much a component of MK Ultra mind control. When we understand that, we see how our society has been shaped and how we've been conditioned for such a long time to not even relax, take time to relax at night and sleep good and get a good night's sleep to rejuvenate. allow our brains to defrag a bit, put things in their proper order. I wake up with so much insight and inspiration, and I never jump up. I always just kind of listen to my day, and process the beauty of starting with that refreshed body, mind, and spirit.
How do you deal with triggers whenever they come up, or if you don't get them very much anymore, how did you deal with them when they were coming up on your healing journey?
Well, triggers would happen with compartmentalized memory, and since I healed from within and wrote out my memory that and moved that pen, it opened the neuron pathways in my brain, and then I consciously saw it and I healed on all levels. So then it didn't recompartmentalize. Like talking about it doesn't keep the neuron pathways open. It recompartmentalizes and represses it. So it's important to write it out to open the neuron pathways. So I don't trigger in that regard. There are, there have been a lot of attempts to trigger me, especially early on, where hand signals and specific MK Ultra triggers were used, and instead of trancing out or responding to it, because they tried to trigger me back in, I would just laugh, and instead, because I recognize that it's an adrenaline rush of no, you're not, So you should have seen their faces, man, because they just knew I was going to trigger, and I didn't. Their paradigm shifted. So, I mean, that was great. That was fun. It was a form of justice in itself, So I had a lot of conditioning where anything that triggers could ultimately give me a positive advantage and a positive insight. So it doesn't have to be a bad thing. But again, as I was triggering and remembering at the onset, I wrote everything out. So now I'm at a point where I don't trigger. But when I see something happen, like our border being flung back open to drug and human trafficking, and the sexualization of children, and the child sex trafficking being the same blackmail operation it's been in for generations, and the horrors that they're doing to the children. That's not a trigger, but it is, I think, more deeper even in so many ways, because of the depth of knowing, the fact that it had been a trigger at one time, the fact that I know they're being used and abused and triggered, so I will write a poem or something. I wrote a lot of poems to just vent, and express, because it helps to shift it over to logic and examine it in better ways. And when I can examine it in a better way, I can add a solution. And again, that solution is very important, because it opens neuron pathways, it lifts us from that dark pit of negativity, and it gives us a clear path forward. So, I encourage everyone, pick up the pen and paper, write out your fears, write out your trauma, write out your triggers, write out your negativity, write out what's immobilizing you, why you feel bad or whatever. Just write it out, add a solution. It really helps a lot. Then get out in nature, walk with your dog.
Yes, add a solution and walk in nature. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Speaking of solutions, there's a lot. I know we've talked about this. There's so many survivors coming out and talking now, which is awesome. But also there's a lot of people on the outside that are saying, I want to be here, but I'm really nervous on how I'm supposed to interact or be there for a survivor, even therapists, and I wanted to ask your advice. You had the amazing Mark Phillips in your life, who was probably, somebody that potentially had to work really hard to build your trust. I know that there was the animals that you saw him with, and there were certain things about him, but that's never an easy process to trust somebody. So I wanted to get your advice for people who are trying to be a friend or a spouse or a therapist to a survivor. What are some things that they can do to facilitate safety with that person?
Um, to listen is so important. To give lots of space for them to write out their memory and process it is really important. And to not rush. Like when Mark had rescued me, and I mean, he was everything. He was so handsome. He was everything. He wouldn't have anything to do with me. And I was like so in love with him. And I think there the part of me that recognized him as my soulmate, the promise from my earliest childhood. I just could just, there was so much. But he said, you have to heal first. You have to know who you are in order to have anything to give in a relationship. So, that was like a huge motive for me to heal faster, so to hurry up and do that. But at the same time, it was important on so many levels that he had drawn that line, because some people get into relationships too fast with survivors, and the survivors in their healing process might trigger and have a crossover memory at a time of passion. And that could all of a sudden seem abusive and cause a panic and what should be a beautiful sharing moment. So, it's really important to take the time to heal first. And then we've got to give survivors that time to heal first before they get into a relationship, or before they can be totally immersed in a trusting friendship, even. It's a process, and it's one that takes time and can be celebrated every step of the way. But we need to keep our expectations. It just because I'm healed, I don't expect this survivor right here to be healed right exactly where I am. We're all on our own learning path. We're all on our own healing path. There's different levels, different layers, different levels of it. And we need to allow for that to be, and encourage them to recognize that path too, and not try to rush through it. Don't do anything before you're ready. You've got to be strong in who you are before speaking out anyway, because some people may not be kind. Some people may not be receptive. Some people may not just want to hear it, and other people, you might be talking to an abuser you have yet to identify. So, just take it slow. Take the time that is needed, and write it all out, and celebrate all along the way. Learn to trust other people more by trusting yourself. And that comes with integrity, and integrity comes with integration. So once we have that healing again, then we know I can trust myself. I can trust my senses. I can trust, then we learn to trust other people and let that expand. We also learn to trust in truth again, because once we know our own truth, we recognize truth around us, and we can start to discern, clearly. And once we can discern, then that trust builds even more. So it's all just part of the process, and it takes time.
Yes, it does. One of the things that for me I get so frustrated with is I see so many survivors that are on their healing journey, and they're literally, bedridden. They're experiencing these horrific memories. They're just trying to get by and hardly can. And, then they have to go to work, and then they have this obligation, they have bills to pay. And it's like, man, it is so sad that we don't understand all of this. Like, they should be getting assistance when they're going through that and
Yes.
getting help.
Yes.
It is so absurd that we expect somebody in that state to just carry on with life and pay bills and work and like live a normal life. Especially a lot of these people may never have lived in normal society before, they ended up recovering their memories and getting away from whatever it was that was, enslaving them. And it's really sad. And I love that you really encourage the healing journey, because that is the most important part. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of assistance for people to receive healing the way that they honestly deserve to and should.
Yeah, even the Child Protective Services has been so corrupted, and that should be at least be a safe place for the children. So many orphanages have been used as by the CIA as a place to target children for MK Ultra. So we need to be aware of all that, kind of restructure the whole the way the system is set up, and instead of using what big pharma and misinformation in the education system has taught us to try to help others, we need to just make a safe place for them and allow them to remember who they are and start healing from within themselves. We need that more than anything, and that's like an evolutionary step that comes with awareness. Awareness is the first step towards that positive, necessary change. It's happening. We need to continue to accelerate it and really restructure this corrupted structure around us. We need to just unite on the levels that are soulful and real, that provide safety and peace and understanding and quiet for survivors.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think one of the other things that, survivors also deal with is when they finally do speak out, or try to get help from somebody, they can't, they're not believed, or if they talk online, they're bullied. And I wanted to see what you do in those cases, not necessarily going into a therapist's office, but I'm sure you've had your fair share of, online bullies and people in your life that try to target you, or things that have happened from your opposition, that put your life at risk for what you do every day. And I wanted to see, how do you deal with that? Because I know that can be very intimidating for a lot of people that do want to use their voice, and they just think, oh, what am I going to do if somebody bullies me or if somebody comes after me? And it's a good concern to have, but you've really navigated it well, and I wanted to see how you've done it.
Well, for one, I'm so focused on making a positive difference, and am so secure in knowing my life's purpose and living that if someone is wanting to attack me, there's a reason for that. They're either being driven by someone to bring me down, it's not going to happen, or they're on their own path and they're denying something within themselves, or they're just somebody mean that doesn't want to believe that this kind of thing exists in the world. And it's like, well, how sweet you don't want to believe, but we need to open our eyes and embrace that truth anyway. So I think I was I don't respond to attacks because there's no point. I've got other things to do, and I just keep moving forward. And usually, if it's on social media or something and somebody has said something absolutely horrific, everybody else jumps on them anyway. So, I don't have to waste my time responding. And I'm certainly not going to defend myself. There's nothing I need to defend. I'm just going to, keep on. I think I learned that very, very early on, because I started speaking out in 1990 before people knew there was a swamp in Washington, D.C., before they knew that the pedophile agenda was a mind control agenda, before they knew that there were perpetrators in D.C. selling us out to a slave society agenda that was comprised of Democrats and Republicans alike. People didn't understand all that, even the most basic stuff, when I was speaking out. And yet my daughter's need demanded that I raise awareness. I needed to help her. She was caught up in the criminal child protective services and being further abused in the system, literally a political prisoner in that system. So I began speaking out of love for her. It wasn't bitterness or hatred. It wasn't because I wanted somebody to validate my experiences. It was because I needed them to understand her need. So when we speak out with a motive that is based in love, that is based in empowering others and helping others, then we don't have to worry about how people respond to us. Because my response back then was astonished at best, and I always just considered it seeds of truth planted. They're going to see it. And I hear from people. I see people when I'm out speaking and stuff, they'll come up to me and say, I heard you speak 30 years ago and I didn't believe a word you said. They're like, I wish I had. And I'll say, I wish you had too. Maybe, if enough people had been aware, but then if we wouldn't be in the mess that we're having to untangle today. And yet, again, it was seeds of truth planted because they were at that event. They were listening to what the speakers had to say about helping the children and stopping this pervasiveness of drug and human trafficking. So it takes time, but again, everybody's on their own learning path. They're not everybody's going to get it on the same level when we speak out. So don't expect it. Don't expect anything other than to use your voice to empower others. And if it's not that, then wait till it is, or find something else to do with what you know, because we got a lot of insight. We can do something positive with it.
Yes, you're so right. And thank you for bringing up the CPS element too. That's another side of it that, gets brushed under the rug and that society thinks is doing good, and tied to family court, there's a lot of corruption that's happening and a lot of poor children going through these systems, with no help.
Yeah, it's at least it's recognized now. Back in 1990, it wasn't recognized as much, but it's something that my experience in MK Ultra had given me insight into, since Senator Byrd had an office in the FBI building where he set up the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So that was corrupt from the get-go as a catch net operation for MK Ultra survivors, for the human trafficking operations that were going on. And people think, well, there's so many corrupt people. And it's like, when we see the structure of manipulation, you can have one head of the FBI that is corrupt and knows exactly what he's doing. And all those agents under him march and do what they're told to do to keep their jobs and, carry out their orders. And so they all look corrupt. They may not be, they may just be completely blinded and manipulated themselves. What's bad is our FBI has authority over all local law enforcement. So anytime there is a human trafficking or an MK Ultra case or anything else like that, the local law enforcement, even if they're involved, compassionate and ready to do something positive for the child, the FBI can step in, take over the case. They can influence the courts. They can have national security invoked on it, just like they did mine, and squash and manipulate the whole court system. So, here we got this one corrupt FBI director at the top, and we're seeing how it goes on down the way that we're structured. Again, we need to restructure with awareness. We can do that. We can clean things up. Then we can have the FBI from meddling in something like Child Protective Services. Maybe we can restore it. Maybe we just need to redo it all the way around and not try to fix this broken system, not try to clean it up, but instead just kind of step over here and do our thing, because that's most effective.
Yes, I would have to agree with you. And you brought up earlier too the secret societies with the Blue Lodge that your family was involved with. That's another aspect to it. A lot of these people that are sitting at the top all belong to the same little secret societies, and their oaths go above anything that, the regular population follows. And their allegiance is to each other. It's not to us. It's not to kids. It's not to anything except protecting each other. And the worst part is these lodges are just right out in the open. Like, it's a secret society, but they're not even trying to hide, and the things that happen in some of these buildings, that I've heard from survivors that, like you, that have been trafficked actually to a lodge or a different establishment where they meet. It's horrific that this is also just sitting out in public, and they're in our communities. They're doing community service. They're working with children. it outrages me so much. I'm like, how is nobody mad that these lodges are just sitting here? We should all be protesting and getting them eradicated.
Any secret society. We don't need to have secrets. We need the truth makes us free. We need to be sharing that with each other. We don't need these secret societies keeping secrets so they can manipulate us. That's ridiculous. Whether it's like the Masonic Lodge type, or if it's these secret meetings like the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, they have their secret meetings, or if it's a secret island like the Epstein Islands, and because there's been the Epstein Islands my whole life, and they're all secret meeting places and secret societies where they share what they know about manipulating minds and how they can best control the population to march to their orders. What for? How much power does anybody need? I just don't get that attitude. But then again, we don't think like they do, and they can't think like we do. When we have our strength of spirit and our wisdom, we have that depth, and that wisdom outthinks a criminal mind every time. That was one of Mark's great phrases, and it's so true. And it does. Their criminal minds are just so linear, and we can outthink them anytime when we use the power of love and genuinely care for each other. But these secrets, anytime, that it's just got to go. No more national security secrecy either, because it's only allowed for criminal activity to go on. We don't need secrets. We need transparency. We need truth. We need openness. We need to connect with each other again.
Amen to that. I completely agree with you. I know. And like I said, they're just in our communities, and
Yeah,
people question, well, why would they need to hide anything? What is
yeah,
there to hide? If they're not doing anything wrong, why would they hide? It's very nefarious, and you see it leaking down to colleges where there's fraternities, and there's just so many different
yeah.
it's where
Mhm.
and I know that that's not necessarily nefarious, but there's definitely, there's been deaths and injuries of some of these ritual things that they do. And, I think we just need to, as a society, just be more aware of that type of thing. There isn't a need for like that type of secrecy, because usually whenever it's, that type of thing, there's something bad that's being hidden. So I appreciate you speaking on that too. And you mentioned love, and I love this topic with you because you speak so beautifully on it. And I truly believe that it is just a part of who you are. Like I feel that a lot of society looks at love like it's just an action. And for you, it's a way of life. And I wanted to just comment on that. And, I think a lot of people have troubles getting to a point where they can even feel like they're ever capable of being loved or of loving. And I wanted to see, what was it in your path? How did you end up working through your resistance to that whenever you were leaving these horrible things and getting away from everybody that you ever knew who never really showed you that? You're such a beautiful example now, and I'd love to hear how you overcame any obstacles that you had in getting there.
Well, it was really difficult when I remembered the things I'd been tortured to do, that I had been forced to do under MK Ultra mind control, knowing what the plan was for humanity. It was really hard to live with. And I told Mark I didn't know how I could live with myself. And that he said, you're not responsible for what you're forced to do under mind control. Your abusers are responsible for that, and they need to be held accountable for their actions. He said, but now that you are aware, you're responsible for all your actions going forward. And it was like, wow, what a neat thought. What to be able to um, move forward and take responsibility for my own life, the ability to respond the way that I choose. And I choose to respond with love. I choose to respond with the most powerful force in the universe. I choose to respond true to soul. So that's how I had found that. And when I was looking to see, who I am, and know that I couldn't judge it by other people's opinions of me, because I'd had enough of that, that was, and I couldn't do that anymore. So I went to the base core energy of my being and found that energy to be love, that spirit, that who I am inside. And I chose then to live the love I am. And it's so much easier just to live the love we are than to try to love ourselves or try to love each other. When we live the love we are, everything else just falls into place. We find love, we live love, we are love.
That's so beautiful. And you really are, like I said in the intro, like you sprinkle love everywhere you go, like I feel like you're so untouchable. There's all these people that, come after you sometimes, and thankfully most people are supportive of you, but you just you never leave that frequency. You're always on just such a high frequency all the time. And I find it so inspiring. You've taught me so much about that. And, just being able to have that ability to respond, like you said, to sit back and choose how I want to show up, just because somebody's mean to me or bullies, or just because they might be hateful or hurt. It doesn't mean that we have to sink to that level. We can still, address things and handle it and not have to change our own state, and you do that so well, Cathy, and I'm so grateful for you. Are you working on anything right now or have anything coming down the pipeline?
Well, just like I said, speaking out and empowering others is in as many ways as I possibly can. And my voice has gotten a lot louder and reaching. It's really exciting to have voice, to be part of the solution during these times. It's our time. It's our time to shine, and I get to see people waking up and finding ways to make a positive difference and encourage them to do it, because it's so, when we have people that do want to attack, or people who are really hurting, if we crawl down into that pit with them and try to lift, it's a whole lot harder to lift when you're down there than it is to stay in your space, stay where you are, and reach in and lift. It's so much easier to bring them up to where we are than to go down where they are and push them up to where we were. You know what I mean? It's just so important to be able to recognize the ways that we can positively affect society. And ultimately, that's what I do every day. It's the way I live, and I'm going to keep doing it, especially with my voice amplifying like it is. And it's amplifying because people are awake and aware and wanting the answers. And it's amplifying because of the Emmas out there bringing truth to light and empowering people with it.
Yes, I know it is a really incredible time. I've only been doing this, just a very, very fraction of the time that you have, but even just in the last few years, I've seen the amount of people waking up is just amazing, and we have you to thank for that in a lot of ways. You were one that stood up before a lot of people were able to or did. And ever since then, like I said, you're probably the most referenced person, and your work is probably the most referenced out of books and podcasts and, different different resources that survivors can use out of anybody. So I wanted you to remind people, if you don't know where to get Cathy's books, I'd love for you to share, because I know that a lot of people try to rip your books off, and that there's one place to get them, you guys.
On my website, trance-formation.com, trance-formation.com. And my books are secured there. You can find the links to my Audible books too. I read every one of my books myself. So by narrating them, they could, it's authentic information, because like you said, there's a lot of misinformation out there. Truth is not only censored, it's diluted. And my books, especially my testimony, Transformation of America, have been altered and then posted as free ebooks all over the internet and promoting the new world order and the slave society agenda instead of exposing it in light of truth. So be aware of that. And then, I always encourage people research further, because the more you know, the more you see. It's absolutely inexcusable that this dark cabal has any influence on our brilliant minds and lives anymore. It's our time. It's our time for truth. It's our time to shine. And truth really does make us free.
Amen to that. And is there anywhere else on social media that you're at that people can connect with you?
They can find me on Twitter at Real Cathy O'Brien. They can find me on Locals, transformationofamerica.locals.com. I'm having fun on that, posting things there too. So yeah, those are a couple places, and there's more listed on my website too, where people can find me, how they can contact me, and yeah.
Thank you so much, Cathy. Like I said, you have just been such a light, and such a love. Like, you really do show up that way, and you set such a good example for others to follow. And not only that, but you give hope for people who are healing as to what's possible. When they say you and they hear your story and you're able to smile and you're able to talk without your voice shaking and you're able to go up on stages and help people and write books, create businesses, have a social media presence, and a very growing one, like you said, you see what's on the other side of actually taking the time to do exactly what this book says, PTSD, Time to Heal, and going through. And it's such a, it's not even a hard read. And I love that you put it on ebook. I like to listen to books in my car a lot. And I know some people are very on the go, and they're the same.
Yeah.
Something really special about listening to a book narrated by the author. So I really love that you did that. So I'm going to have all of that linked below. And is there anything that you wanted to close with, Cathy, or anything else that you wanted to talk about today?
Well, that's pretty much it. Just to encourage everyone to live the love they are and get out in society and connect eye to eye, heart to heart, soul to soul, and find out that it's happening. Where people everywhere are waking up and making a difference. It's not like they're saying in the news. It's so beautiful when we think free and see reality for ourselves.
Well, thank you so much, Cathy. You are just an inspiration. I encourage everybody, regardless of if you're a survivor or not, if you are interested in being a survivor helper or ally, or if you have any survivors in your life, Cathy's books are just so wonderful for understanding what a survivor goes through, how they're treated once they're out of the system, and what can happen to the family unit potentially, and sort of how to navigate that, and about family court system and about the CPS system. And then she also gives the solutions, as she says, with PTSD, Time to Heal. She gives you all the tools to understand what's going on in the world and how to heal from it. So I really encourage you guys, if you haven't yet, go get her work. Like she said, you can find it on Audible too. So if you're driving around and, that might be a better option for you, they're actually narrated by her, which is really, really special. I'll have her social media platforms below. She's constantly updating Twitter. I love her Twitter page. I'm actually excited to go find you on Local. I didn't know that you were on there. So I'll go connect with you there too and connect it. But Cathy, just thank you so much for all the work that you have put in these last, 30 some years, and just for being such a bright light in the community, for being the love that you are, for inspiring creators like me to use my voice, and survivors and whistleblowers to use their voice. So thank you so much, Cathy. Thank you everybody for watching, for supporting. I will have all my links also in the show notes. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.